Now that we're loaded, the next step is to get this load down the hill safely. We have to drop about 2,500 feet in elevation down 3 miles of this long, steep, narrow, windy road. Because of the sometimes annoying but sometimes useful law of what goes up must come down, going down will be easy. Gravity will be assisting us, but one of the problems with gravity is gravity does not care whether we go down the road safely or roll down over the bank. Actually, I take that back. In some cases, gravity would rather we go down over the bank because that would be the path of least resistance. Our job today is to manage ourselves within gravity to ensure we go safely down the road and not roll down over the bank. Because rolling down over the bank would be bad in all ways. That sure was a long and unnecessarily wordy introduction to get this video started. The first thing, after making sure your vehicle is in good working order, which I guess that would make this the second thing, starts with the way you load up your load. When loading a trailer, you want to make sure your load is distributed properly. If you notice on a trailer, there's a bunch of racket going on back here. I thought maybe it was the bear I saw earlier, but I think it's just the cows coming in. A while ago, I saw a bear getting chased down the road by a crow. The bear was running down the road and the crow was chasing it, flying right behind it. You don't see that every day. Anyway, you notice on a trailer, the axles are not in the center of the trailer. They're placed a little bit behind center. The reason for that is you want more weight in front of the axles than behind the axles. You want your center of mass to be a little bit in front of the axles. If it's a single axle, in front of that axle, or if it's a tandem axle, in front of the middle of that tandem axle. Because you want some of the weight to go on your tow vehicle. If your center of mass is balanced over the axles or behind the axles, that can create a really unstable situation. You also want to have some weight put on the axle to give it more traction. You probably hear a common figure, have 60% of the load or the weight in front of the axle, 40% behind the axle, or 10% of the whole load to be on the tongue. So if you have a 1,000-pound trailer, you want 100 pounds of that to be on the tongue. Those are probably good rules of thumb. I tend to go a little heavier, I think. I have a heavy-duty vehicle that can handle it. Especially being out in the woods, I like to have a little more weight on the tow vehicle to give it more traction. But this is not a video to teach you how to distribute your load. This is just to introduce you to the concept. There are some interesting videos, some good videos about that. One of them, or a couple of them, they take a toy truck and a toy trailer, put it on a treadmill, and show you what happens when you move the weight behind the axle, on the axle, and in front of the axle. I suggest you look those up. I would tell you how to search for it, but I think it's easy to find. Back to our regular scheduled pulling the trailer down the hill on the mountain video, or trailer pushing us down the mountain video, up there. In a situation like this, I'm not going to drive like I'm on an interstate in West Texas. I'm going to take it slow and easy. My goal, okay, one of my goals, aside from avoiding rolling down over the bank, is to avoid using my brakes as much as I can. Instead of using my brakes, I want to use the engine to hold me back as much as I can. Brakes operate through friction, which creates a lot of heat, creates a lot of wear. Using only brakes on a long hill like this, they would get very hot and potentially fail. Or at the least, just wear out your brakes more quickly. Whereas engine braking, instead of using friction, the engine uses the compression of gases to slow you down. This does create heat, but compared to the normal operation of an engine, it's not that much heat. And the engine's cooling system can easily dissipate that heat. If you go down a long hill like this, depending on your brakes, what happens when your brakes go out? Then the only thing you have to slow you down is running into things like trees. And that's no good. But if you're using your engine to hold you back, it's not wearing out your engine like it is your brakes, and you'll always have your brakes for backup if you need them, which I think is a much better plan than having running into things as your backup plan. To take advantage of engine holdback, I put the transmission in the lowest gear I can that will allow me to go the speed I want without revving the engine too high. What would be too high to rev your engine? Consult your owner's manual on that. I'm keeping mine at about 2,000 RPM and under. I could take it well above 2,000, but I don't need to. Most of the time I'm keeping it more in the 16 to 1800 range. I'm still getting the holdback I need there. Your vehicle may vary. I also put the transfer case in low range. For creeping down hills like this, putting it in low range opens up a whole new world. I'm in second gear now, but as we approach a really steep spot, I'm going to manually shift down into first gear to give me extra holdback on this steep spot. Before shifting into a lower gear, I use the brakes to slow the vehicle down to a more appropriate speed for the gear I'm putting it in. That is a good use of brakes. If I slam the transmission down into a lower gear before I've slowed down to a speed to match that gear, it's not a nice thing to do. It's a rude thing to do to your vehicle. Now as we're getting to the bottom of the really steep spot, getting to a less steep spot, first gear will have too much holdback for this less steep stretch of road. Now I can shift it back up into second gear. No need to slow down and use brakes to shift into a higher gear. Some of you have seen the red truck I use over on my property where my sawmill is. It was really good at hauling loads off this mountain. It has a manual transmission, has very low gears, and a lot of engine holdback. It would creep off this mountain slowly, holding the load back, and I would rarely have to touch the brakes, mostly just when I'm shifting gears. That truck has almost 300,000 miles on it, still has the original factory brakes. The engine braking is so good, I don't have to use the brakes much with it. I don't know if having brakes that old on it is more impressive or more scary. The age of a lot of things on it is why I've retired it to the woods. This one is so much nicer driving out on the highway, but I was a little bit concerned about getting a newer truck when I found out they no longer make manual transmissions for them. I was concerned about how the automatic would do on hills like this. It does not have as much holdback as the manual does, but it still does well. And this one has the exhaust brake built in, which does help. Some guys like to call it a Jake brake. It's not really a Jake brake, but it accomplishes the same thing in a roundabout way. On behalf of my windshield and me, we both apologize for the lousy lighting. Now we have to turn around so we can go back down the switchback. switchback is too tight to make it around with the trailer. We have a steep narrow spot coming up. The road is outsloped, meaning it leans toward the bank. We'll slow down, shift into a lower gear before we get into it. When you're going around a steep corner like this, especially an outside corner with an out slope, make sure you're ready to apply your trailer brakes if you need to. If the trailer starts trying to push the rear end of the truck around, trying to jackknife it, don't hit the truck brakes. That could make it worse. The trailer brakes will straighten you out. You do have trailer brakes, don't you? I forgot to mention that if you're hauling a heavy load down a hill like this, have good trailer brakes. Now the road's getting less steep, we can shift back up into second gear. We have a narrow inside turn right here. I want to put the front of the vehicle as close as I can to the uphill side to keep the trailer from leading off and going over the edge of this inside turn. This is another really sharp inside turn. I want to put the front of my tow vehicle as close as I can to the uphill side without running into stuff to keep the trailer from leading off too far toward the edge of this inside turn. Coming up here is the type of place log truck drivers would call a pucker spot. I'll leave it up to your imagination to figure out why they would call it a pucker spot. Now that we've passed the really narrow spot, we can unpucker a little bit, but this road is still really steep and there's still a big drop off the edge. I don't think the camera shows how steep any of this is. It's just more of the same the rest of the way down. Unless something really interesting happens, I think we'll call this the end of the video. If this video is up, that means I made it all the way down. Down the road, not down over the bank. Because down over the bank would be bad. I know there are areas of philosophy that would argue there is neither good nor bad within the universe. It is only us who judge things good or bad. But in this case, I would strongly argue with that. Because if we were to roll down over the bank, that would be bad in all ways. Okay, now it's becoming obvious. It's time to end this video.